Anybody here tired? Can I have a witness? Anybody here? Anybody tired? I mean, just dead dog tired. Anybody tired? I mean, maybe you were up and saw every hour of the clock last night, right? In fact, there's a whole lot of people sleep deprived. CDC says 56% of people in America are not getting enough sleep, which is the reason you fall asleep in church. Actually, I had someone say to me, I love coming to the church. It's the only time all week I don't have to think about anything. I was trying to dig a compliment out of that, never did quite find it. My father used to fall asleep in church a lot, and he developed this pattern. I remember sitting next to him as a kid, and he would just reach, he's kind of short. Anyway, he would keep his feet off the floor and stretch them out like a permanent, uncomfortable yoga pose, which is probably good for his abs. But he made himself so uncomfortable, he could stay awake, and I commend that to you in the next few minutes if that will help you out. But actually, of all the generations, the ages, do you know who's getting the least amount of sleep? It's seniors. Seniors. Now, this is a surprise to our children and grandchildren who think we have nothing to do, right? And think we have nothing to worry about, right? But actually, we're the generation, probably it's because we've always got a body part that's hurting, you know? Actually, I had a senior adult who said to me, I sleep like a newborn babe. I'm up every 2 hours, either to use the bathroom or to feed, you know? So, yeah, we're a lot of us, really somebody here is running on fumes. You're just tired. You're tired. You just want a break. Like a mom of preschoolers, just give me a nap. Anybody here tired? But there's another kind of tired. Not the kind of tired that a good night's rest or sleeping in would do for you. There's another kind of tired, it's not the tired at midnight. It's the tired when you first wake up and you're still tired. It's the tired in the middle of the afternoon kind of tired. It's the tired that a nap would not rejuvenate you from. And here you know what I'm talking about. It's being tired of following someone slow in the left lane, right? It's the tired of all these crowds down here in the winter. But by the way, it's your fault. You bought a place in Southwest Florida. What do you think your friends up north are going to do? They're going to come see you. It's the tired of they're still here and they finally left. And next week I've got a whole other group coming in. I'm just tired, right? Maybe it's the tired of being sick and tired of being sick and tired, right? Maybe it's the tired of always having to cover up for and explain the dysfunction in your family and trying to pretend that you're the Facebook version of yourselves. Maybe it's the tired of being lied to. The tired of caring and caring and caring and not feeling like you're getting much back. Maybe it's the tired of being angry every time you watch the news. The tired of being all caught up and pinned up. Anybody here tired? Tired. I know Christians aren't supposed to admit this. We're all supposed to be happy and joyous, but it's just us here and a few thousand people on live stream. So can we just admit that sometimes we're just tired? And the scripture verse this morning is a word for the weary. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11, verse 28, come to me. It's an extended hand. Come to me, all of you who are weary and carrying a heavy burden, and I will give you rest. You'll see that phrase, Matthew 11:28. You'll see that phrase imprinted on the fronts of pulpits in airport chapels and hospital chapels where weary people come in pushing IV poles, or people who've been pushed around by TSA agents just need a place to rest for a moment. You'll see it sometimes on pulpits in mental health institutes. You'll see it sometimes inscribed over a cemetery where you can rest in peace, I guess. It's wonderful when we're weary and tired that Jesus invites us to come and rest, and that's a good thing indeed. And that's not a bad way to hear this text. It is a text. And for the person who's just so tired this morning and doesn't know if you can admit this, this is just for you. You're just tired. Come to me, Jesus says. And I think when Jesus first said those words, and the ones who heard it first, they heard it at the level of being physically tired. They worked harder than we do in the first century. And they probably knew what it was like to feel emotionally tired. They were under occupation from the Roman government at the time. But I think there's even another kind of tired Jesus is addressing and that they're hearing, and that would be spiritual tired. In the context of the Gospel of Matthew, if you went before this, he had just been preaching in the Sea of Galilee towns, the border towns of Bethsaida and Chorazin and Capernaum. And Jesus had poured his heart out and his ministry. He taught more and performed more miracles in those places. And you know what the result was? Almost nothing. He picked up a few apostles along the way, yes. But the truth is, for all of that amount of effort, it sure didn't seem to yield much results. And why? Because in many of those towns, the people they already thought they were wise. They didn't need any more wisdom. They already thought they had it figured out. They didn't need anybody's help. They didn't need a teacher to come along helping. They understood the rules. It was hard to obey the rules, but they knew the rules. Sometimes it's hard to learn a new thing if we're already up to here, right? You teachers know what I'm talking about. So Jesus simply couldn't get any work done much. They were just hard soil because they thought they knew too much. They worked too hard to get to where they were. And Jesus said, woe to you, Bethsaida and Chorazin and Capernaum. If the works had been done in you, if Sodom and Gomorrah in the Old Testament had seen that, they'd have repented in sackcloth and ashes. But you. So he turns from that, and he then addresses people, and he says, so if you're babes, if you don't have it all figured out, if you're not perfect, if you sometimes are struggling, then here's a word for you. And he gets all gentle and he says, so come to me. Because our hearts are restless until they find their rest in him, right? You recognize that quote from St. Augustine, a 5th century early church father named after a Florida town. And this is his great quote. Come to me. Our hearts are restless. There is a God-shaped space in the middle of each one of our souls. The God who created us. And nothing else we try to fill into that. It's like trying to eat cotton candy when you're really hungry. Nothing else will really fit that except a relationship with the Creator who made you and loves you and wants you. That's what our hearts are restless for. And we'll never really find peace until we find it there, right? So that's the kind of hunger, the kind of tiredness, spiritual tiredness. And many of the Jewish rabbis, the Pharisees of the day, to try to help people obey the law, they came up with even a whole bunch of other laws to help them obey the one law, and after a while it just burdened them down like a yoke on their shoulders. Jesus one time talked to them in Matthew 23:4. He said, you teachers of the law, he's talking about us unfortunately, you teachers of the law, you put such burdens on the people that weighs them down, and you don't even lift a finger to help them yourselves. Sometimes just following all the rules will just wear you out. Have you figured that out? Have you ever played a sport with somebody, golf or something like that, and they're all about the rules, and the rules and the rules and the rules. And nothing wrong with rules, but sometimes they're just not even fun to play with, right? Have you ever known a Christian who was so full of the meticulous keeping of the rules and all the ways, and they just weren't even fun to be around, right? Sometimes the rules can make you sort of losing the forest for the trees. You can forget the relationship or the joy that it was supposed to bring you. The rules aren't in place of the relationship. And so Jesus says, come to me. He doesn't say come to a church. He doesn't say join a club. He doesn't give you a set of prescribed things to do. Come to me. This is a relationship, and I will give you the rest that you're really looking for. And goodness knows we need it. Of all the states that are most sleep deprived, most tired, according to their own self-surveys, do you know which state is the most tired? Florida is in the bottom 10, that's true. I thought it'd be New York, the city that never sleeps. They're all proud about that. No, the number one state is Hawaii. What in the world do they have to worry about in Hawaii? Here's the deal. Even if the environment around you is wonderful, you can still be full of storm inside, can't you? So we need a rest. Come to me, all of you who are weary, worn out, heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Man, we love that. But then there's that next verse. If you look up on Kristen Tchotchke kind of stuff, you find that first verse inscribed in coffee cups, and you can put it in, cross-stitch it in a pillow. We love the rest. But that next verse is the one that gets us. Right on the heels of that, Jesus says, so if you're looking for a rest, take my yoke. Take my yoke upon you. For I am gentle, lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Time out, Jesus. When I come to you for rest, what I want is a hammock, right? What I want is a day off. What I want is a trip to the spa. What I want is a sabbatical or something. I didn't come for a yoke. Some of you have not grown up on the farm. I grew up on a farm, but we were all sophisticated. We actually had a tractor. But some of you might have actually grown up on a farm where you're familiar with a yoke. This is show and tell here. And a yoke is mentioned many times in the Bible, a very agrarian culture, Old and New Testament. And people that Jesus would have heard from would be, his original audience would be very familiar with what a yoke is. A yoke used either for a person or for animals to help them do more work than they would probably be able to do on their own. This is an example of a single yoke. And of course with an animal, but even for a person, actually sometimes when slaves were enslaved, they would put them in a yoke. It was a reminder of servitude and humility and bondage, and it weighed heavy on the shoulders. But the truth is, if you put a bucket on either side, you can actually lift and carry a whole lot more than you could otherwise. A yoke, it's the best thing invented since the wheel. It really does get a lot of work done, that's for sure, but even more so if it's a double yoke. The most common animal that would pull a yoke was an ox, right? And an ox is about a 2,000-pound animal, and it is strong as so it's a very strong animal. It can pull its weight. It can pull 2,000 pounds worth of weight, equal to its weight. Well, what happens if you yoke two oxes, anyway, if you put two of them together, if you yoke them together, well, my simple math would say if one ox can carry 2,000 pounds, then two ox could carry 4,000. So you went to math, you paid attention that day. All right, so that seems to be the case. But no, here's the great power of a yoke. Those two oxen don't carry 4,000 pounds. Those two yoked oxen, if they're equally trained and matched, they can actually carry 12,000 pounds. 3 times the combined weight of them as a pair. They are more than the sum of their parts when they are yoked together. It's incredible, right? In fact, an acre of ground originally was just the amount of land that one yoke of oxen could plow in a day. That's actually where the word acre comes from. And so this is a very common metaphor. Take a yoke. And so a yoke was a powerful and beautiful thing. However, the Bible mentions the word yoke about 50 times. 48 of those times, it's used negatively. That is, the yoke was like the yoke of slavery. Sometimes it's even meant in a metaphorical sense. Paul talks to the Galatians in Galatians 6:1. He says, why have you put on yourself this yoke of bondage again to circumcision and the Jewish regulations when God is trying to set you free of that? Peter preaches of this in Acts chapter 15 when the Gentiles were beginning to come into the church. And he says, let's not put on them the yoke of the law that God has tried to free them from. So the yoke was often considered this burdensome kind of thing. The yoke of Pharaoh's bondage and how God broke the yoke of the oppressor. So the prophets will talk about the yokes of oppression and the yoke of sin that can weigh us down. So usually yoke in the Bible is kind of like not something you really want. Except for this verse, where Jesus dares use this word in a positive way. Take my yoke. You tired? You weary? Take this. Take my yoke upon you. By the way, the other positive use of the word yoke comes in Philippians chapter 4. Paul's probably favorite church was the church at Philippi, full of joy. He writes to that church. But there were two women. Women were strong leaders in the church in Philippi from the very beginning. Well, it was still true. So there's two of the women, Euodia and Syntyche, and they're probably small group leaders or pastors or preachers. I don't know what their jobs are, but the key leaders in the church. And for some reason, they were not getting along with each other. In the first century, sometimes Christian leaders disagreed. We don't do that anymore, but in the first century, that happened. And so Paul appeals to them. And by the way, this letter was being read out loud to the church, so you could just see Euodia and Syntyche diving into their purses here. But he says, I appeal to you two, get along, figure that out. Figure out how to be yoked together and pull together, because you can't plow anything if you're pulling different G and hawing in different directions, right? And then he appeals to someone else in the church who's not named, could be Epaphroditus or somebody else. He says, and so I appeal to you, my true yoke fellow, some other leader in the church, would you help them figure that out? I don't know who that other person was, but it's a reminder to me that although we often think of Paul as being a solo actor, it was always Paul and Silas, Paul and Barnabas, right? Paul and Timothy. It was always Paul and somebody else. And perhaps in every church he founded, even though he went on to the next town, he had a yoke fellow, someone with whom he was yoked in that work, and he could write back to them and count on them, and they partnered with him. Maybe that's who that is, this other person he was yoked with. Well, in the 50s and 60s, there was a Quaker theologian, preacher, teacher named Elton Trueblood, who took that image of the yoke fellow and he used that as an image for how Christians can really survive the work and do the work of Christian life. And he called it the Yoke Fellow Institute. And what he was trying to say is, when you try to do any work, including and especially God's work, you're going to wear out. You're going to become weary in well-doing, as Paul would say, if you don't figure out how to share that with somebody else. So Elton Trueblood's whole philosophy was how to figure out and deepen relationships so that when you're doing any good work, caring for mama, whatever it is, that you figure out how to share the work with them. Are you yoked with have you found your true yoke fellow? Of course, that can be within a relationship, a marriage, or a business partnership, or just who you volunteer with. But are you doing a work? Because if you're doing a solo work, you may find yourself not able to get the plow to the end of the row. Yoke fellows. Always looks a little bit like Carson Brown when we look at him now. I don't know why I think that, but anyway. Because the truth is, two are better than one. Ecclesiastes said this way before I said it. Book of Ecclesiastes, you remember that phrase? Two are better than one because they have good reward for their toil. Because if you're connected or yoked and one of you fall, the other one can help pick you up. Oh, but woe to the one who's all by themselves, and if they fall, who's going to pick them up? There's somebody here who what has wearied you is that the person closest and dearest to you has been taken out of your life. And you feel the anguish of this, and everything is now just tiring hard. Maybe there's other kinds of griefs that it's been hard to find the yoke person for you. Paul actually advised us in 2 Corinthians chapter 6, says, don't be unequally yoked. What he means is Christians and unbelievers. That does not mean withdraw from unbelievers. We're sent into the world. But when we're sent into the world, we're sent into it as pairs. Jesus always paired up. He called them individually, but he paired up his disciples when he sent them in to do work. When you do the work in the world, have somebody you're paired with and somebody who shares your values, whether it's a key business relationship or key volunteer work or marriage, because if you don't share that value, you're pulling in different directions. You'll never get to the end of the row unless you can be equally matched, which makes me wonder. I've always interpreted this verse of take my yoke upon you. I always thought of that. Did you think of it this way? I always thought of it as Jesus in the other loop, right? So I'm plowing with Jesus, which I liked because it was like carrying a couch together, but he gets the heavy end, right? But if I'm yoked up with Jesus, those are not pretty equally matched animals, right? My goodness. And maybe it means that, could be that. But what about if instead of Jesus saying, I'm in one loop, come join me, could be that. What about if Jesus is the farmer? I've got a yoke, and my yoke is easy. By the word easy, it's not easy to follow Christ. Have you been doing this more than a day? Have you figured that out? He didn't say it would be easy. The word easy actually should be well fitted. This yoke is perfectly customized for you. And do you know what kind of trade produced, created, crafted yokes? Do you know who the yoke makers were in the first century? Somebody got their legs straight out? You're still awake? Carpenters. Carpenters were the ones who made yokes. People like Joseph of Nazareth and that boy who grew up as a mentor under him. They're the ones who made the yokes. And if you get just the right yoke and you're yoked to just the right person, it's amazing how the work goes. It's still work, but we're not talking about a kind of gospel light or sloppy agape here. We're talking about real work, but work that matters now because you haven't lost the forest for the trees, because it's all about a relationship. There's a strength in you and a companionship with somebody else, because some things are just better with two. You ever tried to seesaw all by yourself? Or play tug of war? Or play tennis? Or sing a duet? Or make the bed. My goodness, all those throw pillows. I mean, it's just so much easier if you have someone to help you. Well, let me give you another one. The Christian life. It cannot and was never intended to be run by itself. Friends, who are you yoked with? Are you really, really tired? Maybe that's what will help. Because we were not designed to walk alone. In 1945, a few months before the end of World War II, while it was still not totally sure how that was going to finish up, talk about a weary, war-weary world, Rodgers and Hammerstein write a musical for Broadway called Carousel. And in the play, there's a guy who, in desperation, robs a bank, gets killed in the effort of that. Anyway, he dies in the arms of his wife. She is totally distraught, of course, as someone here knows so well. Her cousin comes up to her and sings a song to her and says in the song, when you walk through the storm, hold your head up high and don't be afraid of the dark. At the end of the storm, there's a golden sky and the sweet silver song of the lark. So walk on through the wind. Walk on through the rain. Though your dreams be tossed and blown, walk on. Walk on with hope in your heart. For you what? For you never walk alone. You never walk alone. Let's pray. Oh Lord, I wonder if somebody here has been trying to nimble their way down a railroad track on their own, when if they could just reach out and find a hand, they could skip down the tracks together with joy. Grant, O Lord, that we who need rest the most, perhaps what we really need is a new way to do the work. Help us to come to you and accept your invitation and accept the yoke that you offer that connects us not only to you, but to brothers and sisters, so that we might plow with joy. In your name we pray. Amen.
sorrow. I am left in this old wide world, this old wide world. Oh, I ain't got no hope, got no hope for tomorrow. I'm trying to make it, make heaven my home. Sometimes I just don't know which way to turn. Oh, I said of a city, of a city called heaven. I'm trying to make it, make heaven my home. Sometimes I'm tossing, I'm dreaming, oh yes I am. Sometimes I just don't know which way to turn. Oh, I heard of a city, of a city called